Good evening, welcome. I'm Richard Sommer, the Dean of the Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design. Joining me on the stage is Mirko Zardini, the Director of the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal. We're both very excited to be here. With so many of you tonight, this was a hot ticket, even though our baseball team is in the playoffs and they're playing downtown, but this is a hot ticket. So first and foremost, tonight, we have the pleasure of presenting Alvaro Siza, someone we greatly admire and to believe to be among the world's greatest living architects. Second, this occasion marks the first iteration of a planned collaboration between the CCA and the Daniels faculty here at the University of Toronto. Some of you might know that the University of Toronto's architecture program celebrated its 125th anniversary this year. And with that, we were actually, this is a little bit of a stunt, we're introducing a new identity. This is actually the first lecture of this year's public programming right here. But so we've celebrated our 125th anniversary this year. The Canadian Centre for Architecture recently celebrated what, your 25th?
Yes, you are very young. You look very old, in fact.
Yes, yeah. Older every day. As you know, as you should know, the CCA is an internationally renowned institution dedicated to transforming our understanding of architecture and urbanism through its research, public programs, and collections. Mirko is going to talk a little bit about the collections, or the most recent important collection in a minute or two. So while the Daniels faculty has been a leading school of architecture for a long time, during the same 25 years that the CCA has emerged as a major force, our faculty has transformed in size and academic breadth to be much more on the forefront of architecture and education and research, not only in the fields of architecture, but in landscape architecture, urban design, and now art and curatorial studies. Our substantial growth in size, disciplinary breadth, and depth of impact was the impetus to build what is essentially a new campus for us in the One Spadina Crescent. We've also benefited at the faculty from the great generosity of John and Myrna Daniels, and now many others to make this project happen. So our new home, if you haven't seen it, has been quietly under construction for more than 2 years, but you can now see the cranes and major portions of the new project coming out of the ground. So this project at One Spadina will double our current capacity on a site that has room for growth into the future. And in fact, the project is on axis with the dome that we're under right here, and if there were a window in the screen right here, you could look right through it and see to our site. We didn't plan that, but I actually realized that when we were sitting in the hall today. So with this expansion of the faculty, we're literally cracking open what was a former cloister to reach out not only to communities in Toronto, but to a whole host of cultural, industry, government, and academic partners. Our aim with all of this is to put design and visually based models of intellectual inquiry on par with math and text-based modes of the math and text-based modes of inquiry that have been the traditional strength of University of Toronto. U of T, of course, was the home of Marshall McLuhan. And as McLuhan pointed out, we do live in an ever more networked world, and the beauty of this is that we can be much more powerful by leveraging our strengths and assets through partnerships and collaborations with others. So when it comes to exploring the most important ideas and questions that animate architecture today, I can think of no more valuable a collaborator or partner in the world, actually, than the Canadian Centre for Architecture and its director, Mirko. So I'm going to ask Mirko to speak a bit about the occasion for this lecture, a little bit about the CCA, if he wishes, and to introduce the lecture. Before he makes his introduction, I want to make 3 important acknowledgements. First, Ana Paula Ribeiro is here representing the Canadian General Council of Portugal. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge Bruce Kouabara, who I think we'll hear from later. Bruce is the chair of the Board of Trustees at the Canadian Centre for Architecture, partner at KPMG Architects, I should also add that Bruce is Daniel's faculty alumnus and a member of our campaign cabinet, and he is actually a key figure in the emerging collaboration and partnership that we're talking about now. Finally, I'd like to thank Herman Miller, who's not actually here tonight, but the company Herman Miller, for providing the furniture you see on the stage. We appreciate the opportunity to showcase Herman Miller's award-winning and beautiful furniture in this event and actually in many of our events. So thanks to them. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mirko.
Okay. So thanks to all of you. It's very nice to see such interest. Clearly, it's not for us. I know I'll be very short. It's very nice to start this collaboration with University of Toronto and with Richard with a lecture by Alvaro Siza. Before we were discussing, and there was a kind of discussion between Richard and me, who was the first one who met Siza in his office in Porto. I don't tell you the range of time because also myself, I look very old, and not only Richard, if we go to the real years. But anyway, there is somebody that is beating us because we discovered that Robert Levit, who will chair
the director of our architecture program.
Yeah, and who will, I think, take your questions, your smart questions at the end of the discussion, has been working with Siza. So honestly, we couldn't compete with that. But let's say, perhaps the only thing that I would like to say is, how can I say, why Siza is in Canada, why tonight he will speak of shadow. He's in Canada because he was yesterday in Montreal. We just received the first part of the archive of Siza as a donation to CCA, and is a shared gift that we are working on with two other institutions in Portugal, the Sir Albert Museum in Porto and the Gulbenkian Foundation in Lisbon. We are very, very thankful for this kind of consideration that Siza had towards CCA. We feel also responsible to start to operate with this archive. So we just opened the boxes, and we have a small exhibition on two projects that Siza did in the 80s. One in Berlin, perhaps you know that, Bonjour Tristesse, and the other one in Den Haag, in the Netherlands. Both of them were projects that came to Siza because of the work that he did in Porto with the SAL experiment, 2 years social housing projects in Portugal after the revolution in 1975. And it was a very nice discussion yesterday, presentation. I think it's very important in a moment like this one. As CCA, we felt it was very, very important to bring back to the discussion and to reconsider projects and architectures that have been able to deal with the issues of social housing, and more than that, with the idea of integration of different ethnicities, cultures, populations in the urban culture of the different countries. And especially in a moment like this one, in which the problem of diversity and immigration is provoking such different conflictual sometimes reactions. But today, Siza will present to you a project that he did in Portugal, in Lisbon. Is the reconstruction of the shadow in the center of Lisbon, part of the center of the Lisbon that had been destroyed by a fire. Siza will explain the project, but the reason of this choice is because in a certain way it's a very constrained and modest proposal, apparently, for a very important big, urban, architectural problem with a lot of symbolic issues attached to that. And we thought that that could have been a very interesting lesson, perhaps, especially in North America. And coming from Siza, I feel that I will hope that you will pay attention. It's not a kind of, yesterday also in Montreal, it was not a kind of, how can I say, exotic lecture, or the lecture that you are used at, perhaps, more and more in the presentation.
Fireworks.
Yes. So please pay attention to, carefully attention to the words and the images of Alvaro Siza on shadow. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Now, first, my thanks to the Dean Richard Sommer for the invitation, to Bruce Cuvabara, and to the Council of Portugal, and to all of you for coming here. Also Portuguese people that I know that are here, and I'm happy to be in such a beautiful room full of beautiful people. Give me permission to sit. We are in 1989 now. There was a terrible fire in Lisbon, and 20 buildings were destroyed. And happily, in the middle of the night, the wind stopped, because people were afraid that it communicate to all the area center of Lisbon. The fire began in this building, which was a commercial center built in 19th century. And you see how the steel, the structure in steel became completely. It was necessary. First reaction, the beginning, the day after, was to consolidate the walls that remained. So in part, the walls fell down. In part, they were maintained, but all the interior was destroyed. So with steel, the engineers made a consolidation to make possible to take the destroyed things in the street and to begin the works. There was a great emotion in Lisbon and Portugal, and maybe in some parts of Europe, as happened in 18th century, when an earthquake destroyed the center of Lisbon. Earthquake followed by entrance of the sea, so all the center of Lisbon was destroyed. And then the reconstruction was made in the area completely empty, the center, with a plan made by engineers, military engineers, a very well thought plan. The fact is that Chiado was no more, as was said sometimes, the center of empire. There were, as in any healthy town, new centers, different centers. And Chiado was a little decadent, as commercial area, meeting point of intellectuals, writers, painters, was a little decadent. But what was necessary was not to leave Chiado forgotten, changed by other centers, but to include it in the dynamics of the town, together with the other nucleus important to work these movements. The plan, the first plan map, I think, that exists about Lisbon, and you can see, you cannot see because the point doesn't appear. No. But you see that open in the town, on the river, where was the royal palace and the control of navigation was there in the glorious times when from Tejo we're going to India, Brazil, Japan, etc., in the invented boats called caravella, a boat that put together the knowledge of Italy, of Arabs, of the North, in the sequence of the Vikings, concentrated in a new boat that dominated the seas, also because of scientific ways to control navigation. And this is the plan made after the earthquake. It connects, I know it comes, no. On the white it doesn't work, but in the upper part you see an opening. It's the central square called Rocio, which had been a market. And it connects that square to the river where was designed a wonderful big square, Terreiro do Passo. And between these 2 points, a grid orthogonal, systematic, were constructed according a new project, the new buildings. You can see here better. The grid works very well in this horizontal territory. When it arrives to the borders, the 2 hills that are one side and the other of Baixa, as it is called this area, there are hesitations because the orthogonal grid finds the obstacle of topography. And in a way, that was the main point for the reconstruction in not only putting up the buildings, but developing the connection with the borders, with other parts of town. There were points of project left by those hesitations of orthogonal grid against topography. Under the direction of a strong minister of the king, called Pombal, that gave the name to the architecture, Pombalino, the engineers made a type of building with complete definition. The rhythm of the windows, the way to adapt to the topography, and all the regulations made, and all the areas made according to this project. With a special structure studied under the fear of another earthquake, a structure in wood called gaiola, with very well studied connections of the wood to give consistency in case of another earthquake. And the whole put on a platform on pillars. There is water underground. So there are this system of pillars, on them a platform, and on them the gaiola. The idea was that another earthquake, the earthquake moved, in this case, Europe so much that Voltaire wrote a poem about the earthquake in Lisbon. It was, and someone, Moschini, the Italian historian, told me that the fountain in Rome, which is degraded, Fontana di Trevi, was made under the impression of the earthquake in Lisbon. And the idea is that the walls in stone, but not well-structured stone, would fall in earthquake. And the structure would resist. And the dimension of streets is enough, the necessary, so that the wall falling would not affect the structure in front. And probably in those trembling wood structure would be people very happy drinking champagne in the middle of the earthquake. Architecture, Pombalino, as I showed in that drawing before, but also two special buildings. One is the first commercial center made in Lisbon in 19th century in a French, I think that even with a French architect. And the other, which you see in the end of this street, was a convent, made in 18th century, made by an architect, Ludovice, son of the Italian that made the palace of the king in the times of the gold of Brazil. It was a convent, but later it was hotel or different hotels, clubs, restaurants, houses. So had a very complicated life and adapting to the times, and then in the end a commercial area. This is project of Ludovici that had a big basilica, and you see in the left what was always the facade, was the hall, the entrance with big chair, but then was a church because basilica was not built, was not money for that. And then the entrance to the commercial center. It was a late Baroque, and the first idea in recuperation was to make of the ruins of this, the main hotel, big hotel in Lisbon. Did not go on because there were no investors for that. Here is the same facade as it became as commercial center. The fact is that Pombal, the director of all this reconstruction, expulsed the Jesuits. And so the convents became free, including this one. Here is the aerial view of the area. Here was important to show that this is the street, and the buildings I showed Grandela, and Chiado convent are those. So it's a street that comes from the central square, old square, comes up and then down again and meets in the two extremes, meets the grid of New Lisbon. And this is the same after the fire. So, Grandela destroyed, Chiado, convent of Chiado destroyed, here, Chiado, and all these buildings. And in the middle there were the famous shops in 19th century, when this was the center also of fashion. This one is called O Bonar des Dames. And the people past the year were very sad because these images were so strong in life of people. I remember as a child to go with my parents to Lisbon, everybody would make Chiado, and probably also my mother entered O Bonar des Dames. The buildings, the repeated buildings, Pombalino, were in this state. In some of them, the wall fell down. In some, it was preserved and recuperated. We thought project a new gaiola, but now in concrete, occupying the center of building with, as part of structure, the stairs and the block of stairs and lifts. The plan included what we called Patio A, this one, and Patio B. And then Grandela and Chiado, the two big buildings in the area. And there is a big difference of level between this and this, the last street of Baixa. So this building is also a supporting wall for the big difference of level. And the street goes up and down. Also important for the plan, for the concept, was the possibility to negotiate with Metropolitan, which was then in construction, an access that comes and enters underground, metro, enters Chiado building, and then it's the big access to the Baixa. It means that the last street of Baixa, in a way, it was a second street, a service street, in a way became the first street of Chiado. And I mention it because in polemics that began immediately after. First, because it was strange an architect of Porto go to make this important work in Lisbon. And the other polemic was about what to do. For some people, this was the opportunity to introduce modern architecture in the center of town. And so what I proposed was considered a lost opportunity. For others, including me, and happily including all the parties of the municipality, that it should be remade, reconstructed, or recuperated. And why? As I look to Chiado, I saw it as one building, projected at the same time. All the streets have the elevations made, as I showed one of them. It's one building, one big building. It's like, suppose if from this coat this appears, fell down, I will not put a red one. If I make a new coat, I can put red. But it has no sense. So it should be, and it was politically defended in that way, recuperated. As this could seem to people very conservative and irrelevant, but the important transformation in Chiado was not architectonic language, was to make in some points by the first time a relation with the areas around it, which were cut with obstacle of topography. Then the transformation has to see with movements, not only the metro, also pedestrians and motor cars. Here we see what I called patio A, and to the right, patio B. And the void under is Chiado and Grandela. Patio B, there was complete elevation of buildings that also served as supporting wall for this big building, an old convent, and then a school, again at a level much more elevated. So the houses were going against the wall to support it. But conditions of life there were not good because there was no ventilation in these houses because they were going against the high wall. And one of the objectives, wishes of municipality was to reintroduce housing here because in the time it had disappeared. In the night, Chiado was desert. There were shops and in the upper floors, storage for the shops. And that was probably the reason of the fire. Nobody was there. Only one woman lived there that escaped. Anyway, the announcement of fire came late because nobody was there. So I thought that it was necessary to cut the back part of the buildings, to create a void, and so to make the ventilation, cross ventilation of these houses. And in the other patio, to the left, we destroyed or took storage that were there in wood barracks in the end, and there is another court. And also, we cut that front with the building, the Chiado, no, not this, the Chiado here. We cut, you see in red, to establish a connection with a stair that goes following the stair that is up. Difficult to see. Yes, you see here a stair. And I opened it. As we discovered that the real facade of the convent was the one to the right. Someone had occupied free space. So there is a very direct pedestrian access to Baixa. There are openings, and there is Metropolitan, of course, coming to this street down. Today, Chiado has much life. It was difficult in the beginning because the shops closed at 7 o'clock when everybody left the work and went for shopping. When came Fnac to Lisbon, it changed completely because Fnac was open until midnight, 1 hour, and organized cultural debates, and so it changed completely, and the other shops were obliged to make something and not to close at 7 o'clock. This is the patio B I spoke, and this is the opening made. This is before this opening, so we cut these houses here. For that we had to consolidate supporting wall with cables, and immediately after the disaster, I came here and I was walking between the ruins. Up is the Carmo church that was in ruins since the earthquake. And I saw that has a big door open to south. And I thought, beautiful would be as I will open a space to make access to that door in Carmo, with ramps and stairs and also a lift, and there is a lift. And I thought I had a great invention. I made sketches with ramps and so, as you see here, and I made a plan for that, rigorous plan. And I thought, big invention. But an historian of the municipality showed me an old map that I didn't know, made before the earthquake, and was there a stair coming down from, and that explained the importance of the south door. And I realized that even when things are demolished in a town, there is a kind of inertia, of persistence. They disappeared physically, but something, maybe things around how they react, puts up the destroyed thing. And what I had was not an invention, wasn't the perception of that thing underground. That makes us more humble. In this plan you have patio A, patio B, and the connection I told you, the new stairs. And from that interior area that goes then up to Carmo, I could make a stair coming to the street Carmo, with a big arc. So the patio is in a level that takes horizontally to the street that goes right to Chiado. So if you come down, you have a door, you enter in the perpendicular street. And the street goes up and down. So in the middle was necessary to put a stair to make a connection to Carmo Street. And I project it. This is in the patio, the model with stairs and the ramps. And there is also inside of one of the houses a lift for boys of my time. This is the entrance from the perpendicular street in direction of Carmo, where will appear appeared already, the stairs and ramps. And here is the entrance for the stair I mentioned in the terrace, in the patio. The plan of these houses, again you see the concrete gaiola, the stairs, the stair that comes to the street, and the patio, and in the left the connection to at the same level to the perpendicular street. Difficult to organize this because as the street has big angle, the topography, the control of the levels of different buildings and so was not easy, but was possible to do it. This is the arc I mentioned, but again, someone gave me an old postcard with already destroyed nearby arc with the stairs. So I think I was protected by, I don't know which god. Going in the street, Carmo, main street, at the right you have Grandela, and there is a lift, the lift of Santa Justa, that goes to a still lower level, where is Baixa, main construction, goes up, and there is a bridge to connect to the church of Carmo, the church I mentioned it, and is placed in the terrace of one of the houses, of the Pombalina houses. Is a lift in iron, very, very beautiful building made in 19th century. And this bridge goes to the terrace of that house and then to the church of Carmo. So there is a complete parkour that includes up the lift, bridge, Carmo, going down to the patio, and through that door to the perpendicular street, and through those stairs to the middle of the street. Here are we in the terrace of Carmo, with the south door, important door, Gothic door, and the arcbotant, the structure to support the building. The big houses in patio A, the other patio, again with the nucleus of lift and stairs, structural, and a regulation, very simple. So regulation for the project is, I did not make all the projects, was free for the owner. I made only 2. The regulation was that the walls should not go to the windows, because there is a modulation of windows, very convenient. But there were people before that I had seen that decide to make like a second facade, leave for superintendenza the facade as it was, but behind is different. And then they can put divisions, doesn't matter who, but now here is obligatory to respect this. This patio already built, and here again the metro arriving to Baixa with galleries, you see, and goes to the ground floor of Chiado. The entrance was a special design, and I could make also the station here, this one in Chiado. For the building Chiado, my idea was all the building an hotel using the late Baroque organization of the Ludovici plan, but it was impossible. There was no investor. In the end, it includes a commercial center and an hotel and some shops independent. It's a big machine that goes from the high level to Baixa, as you see with the new building, the 18th century building, put on the medieval structure. Grandela is the commercial center in 19th century, also with interior, since the 30s, interior mechanical stairs that was used to quickly, comfortably to go from one level to the other. The buildings in reconstruction, here already finished, with the Grandela in the left, and this building was necessary to remake all the work of stone and steel, and so that was destroyed. Here to the right, the convent of Chiado. Patio A, the new stairs and the reconstructed houses. Here, the walls resisted. One of the difficulties was, because of the angle of street, how to organize the connection of the classical elements. It was necessary to study well how to make, because all these things were remade, the finishings. This, in this case, was used the old one. But all these things had to be designed properly with the system of infrastructure. We recuperate some grids, verandas, and we remade them and recuperated them. You can see from the interior, and in the two houses I made, I studied the interiors. I looked for to find the proper detailing, not all the detailing, but they fitted well with the building. With exterior, the windows double for isolation. All the pieces for closing the windows were designed, and the doors, the wall protections, the kitchens, the use of the under the roof. All this was detailed, the chimneys, all the elements, exterior and interior, were designed the way the doors and the ferragens, I don't know how to say yes. All this was designed and applied because we had control of the exterior. Department with people that follow the works of different architects to make respect the detailing and so. And the fact is the Le Bonheur des Dames came back. Anyway, when I walked after the end of recuperation, if there is an end for anything, I was a little frustrated, as everybody, because it's missing the patina, the interventions through times, the complexity that comes and that already do not control and develops well or bad, but free, giving reality, truth to the town. But then architects cannot design. The great architect for that is the time. Thank you very much. Roberto.
Thank you, Siza. That was delightful to see. I'm happy to see you here in Toronto for the first time. Just by the way, I didn't know you were going to speak on the Chiado. It reminds me of a story from when you were first presenting in 1989, and I remember that you were presenting the design for the Chiado, and you were showing the windows with their regular pattern, imitating or reconstructing the Pumbaline pattern. And somebody in the audience asked, why aren't the windows more expressive of the vitality of the people of the city? And you said, well, the architecture shelters the people are the ones who are vital. The architecture need not express it. It wasn't the architecture, it was the people that you were sheltering. Anyway. Sorry. Okay. Oh, better? Ay, ay, ay. That sounds so loud. Okay, well, I'm going to ask a few questions and then turn it over to the audience. And my first question, it seems a little remote from what you presented today, but one of the things which I have always been struck by in your work is that it is filled with, there's humor and irony or wit in the work. It reminds me of another great master, which is Le Corbusier, who I think stands out amongst modernist architects for the wit and irony in his architecture. And I just wonder if this is something that you think about or it seems important to you in your work still.
You mean irony?
Ironie, humor.
We must have irony to become healthy, we architects, because if we don't have the help of irony, we can be always, oh my God, it's necessary to laugh, not to take too seriously the problems of development of a process. When I am really nervous with things, I take a paper, a white paper, and I become designing and I forget. That is the reason why I design and I make sometimes sculpture, and so is to be during some time free from the tension that many times is related with architecture. No?
Yes.
That you know well also, because you have been in my office during many years.
Yes, I was there for Chiado.
Also, and I'm happy to see you.
Thank you. Well, I think that the irony is also present in the work, not probably so much what was shown tonight, but there are forms of humor and pleasure in the design which are visible in the buildings themselves. Anyway, I have two more sort of serious questions. One of them is, Kenneth Frampton, the great historian and critic of architecture, coined a term, critical regionalism. He used it to describe the architects who he liked. You are one of them, and I think that he characterized you perhaps as a critical regionalist. It was meant to distinguish architects who were responsive to local climate, custom, local technologies, forms of building, and it was meant to distinguish architecture that resisted what he saw as global and uniform trends to make architecture more globally uniform. I wonder, do you find this characterization of your work as critical regionalist useful?
Yeah, well, it depends on interpretation of this title or this designation. And I know it became very polemic. The main reason, in my opinion, is that the word regionalism became maldita, como se diz? Damned. Yes, so when Kenneth Frampton put the word regionalism, he opened, involuntarily, of course, a polemic, a discussion about it. And I read recently a text by Cohen that puts another designation that is international criticism, I think.
International criticism.
Regional criticism.
Oh,
Frampton is regional
critical regionalism.
Yes, critical, and put international, critical internationalism. Yes, that. And I think that in a way is the same thing they mean. Because the critic applied to regionalism means that it doesn't mean regionalism, but on the opposite, that with working inside and not going beyond the real situation in a region, you don't forget, and you are improving an evolution with the bombardment of things that are not local.
Yes.
Bon. Critical internationalism means internationalism, but not like after the war, the uniformity of international style, another designate international style. But in the end, these 2 points of view going in opposite direction, they meet. And I think it is not, in my opinion, correct, the radical critique to the idea of critical regionalism made by some people to Kenneth Frampton, because what he means, in my opinion, is not emphasis on regionalism, but emphasis on in peripheric countries, one thing that does not more exist, but that existed. Portugal was, after being so universal, also became peripheric. Where the people making, sometimes in political difficult situation, to come out of that and to enter the universal debate. And when he invented that definition, it's necessary to see that I think he thought much about Spain and Portugal, and I don't know which countries more, where the political regime was asphyxiating, and he was giving a hand to the people that were trying in those conditions to get out of it. That's my interpretation.
You beat me to the punch for my next question, because I remembered something else that, now I don't remember whether you said it or I read it, I mean, something that you wrote. But when you received the Alvar Aalto medal, I believe it was around 1989, and I remember at that time, it was when you said something to the effect that you felt there was some kinship that you felt between Portuguese architects and Finnish architects because of the peripheral relationship that they had to the central events of European modernism. And that that architects on the periphery were able to look critically from outside at both the ideas of modernism, but also the consequences of modernization, and it gave you a very unique perspective. Do you think that was, well, maybe you could say something about the importance of that, or continue to.
Yes, the strong influence of Alvaro Aalto, that moment in Spain, mainly what I know, Spain and Portugal, but not only, he was very influent in Italy, for instance. This emergence of Alvaro Aalto, in my mind, I could relate that with the conditions of, even if Alvaro Aalto has been a member of CIAM, but not a radical member. He passed there in press. He lived also in a country of periphery, with recent independence even, and where handicraft work was still very good, very good. Those things existed also in Portugal. In Finland, it was difficult to have concrete for constructions even in that time. So there were difficulties there, and a wonderful, marvelous reaction to that, and it was received as a kind of medicine, kind of pills of medicine in Portugal and in Spain. That's relation. Then the evolution was different in this and in this and this, and we all entered in the core of universal thinking about architecture. So.
How am I doing for time? Can I ask two more? Okay. One of the questions, your presentation of the detailing of the windows and of the hardware made me think of this issue, which is that, I mean, I worked with you for you in 1988 to 90, and we used to sit and draw the details of windows. We didn't spec them, we designed them because the standards for their manufacture were being established. It strikes me that was one of the conditions which was interesting about Portugal and Spain at that time, is that the standardization of the building industry was still fresh. Architects were participating in establishing those standards. And I just wonder if that continues to be true. I mean, the funny story is that when I came back to the States, I started to draw a window detail, and my employer said, "What the heck are you doing? Why aren't you speccing it? What makes you think you should be drawing the detail?"
Robert, you speak so well Portuguese.
Se eu falo português, não vão entender-me.
Ora, sem microfone, explica-me melhor o que é que perguntaste.
Em português?
Em português.
Ah, bem.
There are many Portuguese here, I think.
Está bem, estava a dizer que em Portugal e Espanha, nos anos 80 e 90, ainda era possível de pormenorizar pela mão do arquiteto questões como janelas, cancelaria, ferramento, como é que se diz? Os pormenores.
I understand. It's a good
Okay.
question. I like the question.
Now, do you still remember
the
in English?
question was the, the question was how is it now?
Yes,
I
has it
understood.
changed?
Oh,
Yeah. That's the
I
question.
understood. Now I was interested in the question because I understood
Sorry.
what he was going to ask.
It's hard even in English.
It
for some
was
people
not
to
an
understand.
irony. So, it is still possible, but fighting a little. And probably is the last country in Europe, the Europe I know well, West Europe, South mainly, where it is possible. But as these countries in South want it's a kind of complex to be modern as the North. They make difficult things that can be done and is rational at least to do. So there are still very good carpenters in Portugal, but you have to look for. It's not as before when you have been there. You have to try and you find very good ones. Probably the best are in Switzerland at this moment. I saw in Ticino the quality of handicraft work in Switzerland, developed, more than developed country. And some of them were Portuguese. As even in Paris, when someone wants quality, call Portuguese mason or carpenter or so. Then there are still less than before, but there is a reaction against. And only a special client accepts that, for that he must love it, want it. And then it is possible to do, and to do very well. But in other countries, in France, I projected recently one church for Rennes. And I had talks with the bishop, very high-level talks. He was a Jesuit, part of him, very high level, and so, and everything was well. I made the project. I sent it was approved, and then I received a letter from an engineer charged to make the gestion of the construction and organize construction, in which he said, dear architect, what we want from you is your talent, but forget those things of design, the windows, that and that. Let that to specialists. Because the obsession in Europe, much at this moment, I think, is the obsession of speciality. Everything must be a specialist. So, almost was approved, and probably will be approved, a law in Portugal saying that architects would make the buildings. Interiorists were to make the interiors. Landscape architects, exterior space, and I don't know what more. But as something obligatory, it means I could not design a garden on a square unless I had a landscape architect. But some landscape architects I had already experienced say, no, this is to me. You don't know nothing about this. So this is situation and is terrible because it's being cut this thing of a project is a whole. And as we have not time to study and know everything. We meet, and from the beginning, we have meetings, and have this engineer and that and landscape architect, but it's the same. It's a whole. That's a big problem. I feel the conviction that this man is architect, no word about the street in front, and so on.
Before I turn the microphone over to the audience for questions, I have one simple question. After, and this is a big number, after 50 years of practice, I think it's over 50 years of practice for you as an architect, do you have any words of advice for young architects? I think half of the audience here are students of architecture. Anything you might like to say to them?
I didn't understand. You speak Portuguese very well.
Tá bem.
Don't have complex, because indeed I have difficult to understand when people speak quickly. Usually I have at my side Robert or another one that are more quick and say, Robert, what he said.
I wouldn't be worried if I thought the English speakers understood me, but maybe they don't either.
So,
but in Portuguese.
Oh, yes.
Se o Siza tem algum conselho a propósito dos desafios ou oportunidades para os arquitetos jovens, porque na audiência uma metade são alunos de arquitetura.
Yeah. Lucky ones, because they, not because they are candidates to architects, but because they are young. Yes, I work since a long time, and you know, you were also young. You are still young, I must say.
Less young. Less young.
And I have always at least one young person making stage, sometimes foreign people, and sometimes they stay more time, and then they get more power and become architects with their own studio. And as Roberto, for instance, he worked some years in my office, but then he grew up, and now he has an office in Porto. And also he married, many marry also. Of different, with Portuguese, with people of Libya, because the Erasmus brings a lot of different countries. And they meet young. So I have always, and for instance, this August, I stayed in Porto all the time. I had fantastic holidays because everybody in the office went out, and remained only one secretary and one stagiaire. And during August, we made project of a house, of one house, a simple house. And it was so quiet because no telephone calls. The town, the traffic in town, very good, fantastic. Much better than to go to Algarve.
So they should work in August, away from distractions. Okay. Questions from the audience. How does it work?
Your work in Chiado, the subtractive process seemed maybe even more important than the additive, and that seems to be a common theme in much of your work, like at Leça da Palmeira, where you excavate to create the pools almost out of the earth. I'm curious what your take is on the relationship between removing to make space as much as adding to make space.
What is the relation between?
Eu estava a perguntar sobre a diferença.
Eu posso fazer um atento? Desculpa, meu português é terrível, mas eu...
Tá bom. Muito bom.
Eu estou aqui. A seu projetos, muitas vezes a estratégia associativo é mais importante que aditivo. Eu quero saber que desculpa.
No,
Na Leça da Palmeira, neste projeto nasciado, a estratégia para tirar os momentos de necessidade é muito importante. Eu quero saber mais disso.
A estratégia para tirar. You can say in English, the
process of subtraction.
And Roberto translates to me.
Escavar
Sim.
em vez de... Ele está a falar da ideia de tirar ou escavar, fazer espaço
sim.
vazio, em vez de aumentar, talvez construir, assim.
Sim, retirar. But ele falou em swimming pool.
Estava a falar das piscinas da Leça da Palmeira.
On which point?
Na praia. Ele disse que na praia ele tem a impressão que este projeto tem mais a ver com escavar, tirar.
Sim. Chiado.
Chiado está a perguntar se também tinha a impressão
sim.
que era similar neste aspecto.
Sim.
Is that correct? Questioner, if you follow?
Sim. Well,
Okay.
I heard already that about many projects I did. And I agree that I recognize that the approach to a project that I make, or the approaches, are sometimes very complicated, very confusing things. And then in the evolution, in the process, I began retiring what is confused. In that sense, it can be said escavar. This is, or because it is too much, because I consider too exuberant for the item, for the context, or because it's confusing, it's not clear. And what I like much, and I think it's the obligation in a building, is that when I arrive, I immediately can see where is the entrance, and when I enter, where we go to that site or that, without the need to put thousands of small papers saying this, toilet. No, I like clear distribution. And I remember that when I feel the possibility, for instance, to make the details of a building, is when I, at home, sometimes alone at home, I think of the project, and I can mentally make all the parkour. I can follow the corridors, the openings, the narrow things, and so. So probably this thing I feel need to remember the building in process mentally, dominate what is without drawings, and so this exercise obliges to exactly take things, take confusions, and so the things make clear. Yes, so I agree, and many times people tell me, and different critics, about this operation of excavating, taking material, creating space.
Okay, are there more questions out there? Is there somebody? Yes, over here.
If I could,
Yes.
and at the risk of being removed from the room, I'll admit that I'm an engineer. But my question is about collaboration. In your opinion, sir, which areas of collaboration do you feel are most important between architecture and engineering?
Really, in a debate, I am a disaster. Tell me.
Ele quer saber em que área colaboração entre engenheiros e arquitetos é mais importante.
Oh, yes, it's fundamental. And I must say I feel more comfortable in discussing a project in the meetings in general, with engineers than with architects. I like, since the beginning, to have the team, and since the beginning, discuss the thing, even without complete information, still with the engineers, and putting problems in about general things, since the beginning. And then during the development of project, and today, we lose more time if we want to develop a project total, not addition of specialities. We lose almost so much time with the control, the coordination, with all the infrastructure, machines, security, cameras, and I don't know, air conditioning, grids, and so much time with that as with conception of the design. But if we don't do this, we don't achieve the quality in spaces. Appear grids, points of light there, and lettering, and there's confusion. Yeah. So it's fundamental. And it's fundamental that the engineer is also open to that and has patience to that. But I work with very good engineers in Portugal and also now in New York, for instance. There's no problem.
I have to tell just one quick funny story about an engineer in Siza. Decades ago, you were working on you're having a meeting with an engineer over the water tower at the University of Aveiro. And in Portugal, everybody speaks in very respectful terms to each other, Senhor Arquiteto, Senhor Engenheiro, and the engineer is explaining how to make the water tower that Siza designed stable. And he's explaining at length his solution. And Siza's listening with very respectful attention. And at the end of the explanation, Siza says, "But I have one problem, Senhor Engenheiro." And the engineer says, "What is that problem?" And Siza says, "But your solution, it's very ugly." The story had a happy ending because the engineer worked with Siza, came back with a solution that was beautiful. So we are wrapping up, and I'm going to invite Bruce Kuwabara to the stage to make a few closing remarks. Thank you.
Well.
Last night, Alvaro Siza spoke at the CCA, and it was one of the most incredible events that I've ever experienced at the CCA. And we talk about kind of creating a buzz at the CCA, and that one would be really about how to think about contemporary architecture, the city. And we had a presentation of two very different projects. Like, he's not just doing a roadshow lecture. It was really about housing projects in Europe, following the work that he had done in Portugal. And it was social housing housing for immigrants in Germany, in the Netherlands, and it was really remarkable. And what was really remarkable that's the same as this evening is that there were so many young people who came out on a Thursday night and here a Friday night because I think people sensed that there's some real relevance in the kind of deep thinking that Alvaro Siza has done and the production of architecture that's really meaningful. So the auditorium of 200 was packed. We had another 500 people who were getting a live feed in the Shaughnessy House, and there was a buzz at the CCA. Tonight, we have 1,400 people in one of the great spaces in Toronto, a Darling and Pearson building. It's over 100 years old. And this is where we convene to think and talk and exchange ideas that matter. And your presence here sends the CCA a clear message, and that there is a high level of interest in architecture in Toronto, in Canada. We tried to get Alvaro Siza here on numerous occasions, and it wasn't possible. And so one of the things to celebrate tonight is the fact that the audience came and Alvaro Siza came, and I'm so impressed. I want to thank the Daniels faculty and the University of Toronto and the team at the Daniels, especially Dale Duncan, Jacqueline Rothflob, and Pamela Walls. But there's a whole team of volunteers who really stepped up, a lot of students who helped make this event work. And then I want to thank Richard Sommer for leadership, leading the school and trying to really expand its platform. And I think it's remarkable, actually, and so thank you, Richard. Mirko, we just have a lot of laughs. It's pretty funny. Last night was particularly funny when he was asking for smart questions from the audience. And Robert Levit, that was really special. I think I understand you more because of your questions. Finally, before I thank Alvaro Siza, I want to thank Roberto Cremascoli, who you should meet him. He's from Milan, and he's an architect in independent practice, but he associates with Alvaro Siza's office on larger projects in Italy. And it's very different, that system, and it's fantastic, actually. So Alvaro Siza, I think you inspire everyone in the room to think deeper. Your sketches are alive. They're some of the most remarkable drawings I've ever seen. And I want to just say that in the acquisition of part of your archive, I think the most incredible thing are your sketchbooks. And I would really hope that someday that we would see those drawings here. And there's a kind of interesting aspect to tonight where at the CCA the room holds 200 and it was incredibly intimate, and I can actually think that we saw intimacy at the scale of Convocation Hall tonight. It's rare, actually. And as we left dinner, Phyllis wasn't feeling that well yesterday, Phyllis Lambert. She attended the lecture, and then on the way out, I said, well, what do you think? I walked her out, and she said, just go back in there and tell Alvaro Siza that I really appreciate that he talks slowly. I could understand everything he said, and that I really like him because of he is who he is, and that he's authentic. So I want to thank all of you for attending this event. I think it's been a great event. and it's fundamental to the building of culture. It's fundamental to making a kind of connection between Montreal and Toronto, between the CCA and the Daniels, between Portugal and Canada, between generations of architects. And it's a very special evening. And I just want to thank you. Have a great evening. Come to Montreal. Come to Montreal. Come to see the exhibition of the Siza archives. Come to see the current exhibition. Show up, because we're going to show up here. Okay, thank you very much.